There's a hidden pattern in people who get hurt deeply, and most of us completely misunderstand it. When they're in pain, they don't always cry. They don't raise their voice. They don't fight for their side of the story. Instead, they become quiet. They withdraw into themselves and answer every question with the same 2 words: I'm fine. But if you've ever been that person, you know those words rarely mean what they seem to mean. Beneath the silence is a storm of thoughts, emotions, and memories that feel impossible to explain. While everyone else assumes you've stopped caring, you're actually struggling to hold yourself together. You want to speak, but the words won't come. You want to be understood, but you don't know how to let anyone in. And if that sounds familiar, if you've ever gone silent when your heart was hurting, then this video might explain something about yourself that nobody has ever truly understood. Most people see this silence and immediately jump to conclusions. They assume these individuals are cold, emotionally distant, avoiding responsibility, or simply too immature to deal with their feelings. Some even interpret the silence as a form of punishment or rejection. But what if every one of those assumptions is wrong? What if their silence isn't a choice at all? What if, beneath that quiet exterior, something much deeper is happening, something most people never see? The truth is that silence is rarely as simple as it looks, and understanding what lies behind it changes everything. To truly understand why some people go quiet when they're hurt, we need to let go of a common misconception. Silence is not always a choice. Most people assume that if someone isn't speaking, they're avoiding the conversation or refusing to communicate. But psychology suggests that something much deeper is happening. When emotional pain becomes overwhelming, the brain can shift into survival mode. At that point, the nervous system is no longer focused on connection or communication. Its primary goal becomes protection. When we feel safe, we can talk about our emotions, explain our thoughts, and engage with others. But as emotional stress increases, the nervous system begins responding to the situation as if it were a threat. Some people react by fighting back. Others try to escape. But there is another response that often goes unnoticed: the freeze response. This happens when the brain becomes so overwhelmed that neither arguing nor leaving feels possible. Instead, the system temporarily shuts down. Imagine an old computer trying to process too many tasks at once. Eventually, everything freezes. The screen is still on, but nothing responds properly. The same thing can happen emotionally. From the outside, the person looks quiet and detached. Inside, however, their mind may be flooded with thoughts, emotions, and fears all crashing into each other at the same time. This is why someone can have 1,000 things they want to say and still remain completely silent. It's not because they don't care. It's not because they have nothing to say. It's because their emotional system is overloaded. The words are there, but they can't seem to reach them. What looks like avoidance is often a nervous system trying to protect itself from emotional overwhelm. In many cases, silence is not rejection at all. It's simply the brain's instinctive way of surviving a storm that feels too intense to put into words. One of the biggest misunderstandings about quiet people is the belief that their silence means nothing is happening inside. From the outside, they may appear calm, distant, or emotionally detached. They sit quietly, avoid eye contact, and offer few words. But beneath that silence is often a level of emotional activity that most people never see. Their mind is replaying conversations, analyzing every detail, questioning every choice, and trying to make sense of what just happened. Thoughts collide with emotions. Doubts compete with memories. Questions appear faster than answers. Was I wrong? Did I overreact? What did they really mean? What should I say? While others assume they have checked out of the situation, they are actually trapped inside it. Their brain is processing so much information at once that it becomes overloaded. The silence is not emptiness. It's congestion. It's the feeling of having 1,000 emotions demanding attention at the same time and not knowing which one to speak first. If you've ever gone quiet while your mind was screaming, then you know exactly what this feels like. One of the most common roots of this pattern can often be traced back to childhood. No one is born believing that their feelings should be hidden. As children, we naturally express pain, sadness, fear, and frustration. We cry when we're hurt, seek comfort when we're scared, and openly show our emotions without shame. But for some people, those emotions were not met with understanding. Instead, they were ignored, criticized, dismissed, or even punished. They may have heard messages like, "Stop crying, you're too sensitive," or "There's nothing to be upset about." Over time, the child begins to learn a painful lesson. Expressing emotions is not safe. When a child repeatedly experiences rejection or judgment during vulnerable moments, the brain starts creating protective rules. They learn that showing sadness may lead to criticism, showing anger may lead to punishment, showing fear may lead to being misunderstood. Eventually, vulnerability becomes associated with danger rather than connection. Instead of reaching out for support, they learn to pull inward and deal with their pain alone. Years later, those same patterns often appear in adult relationships. The moment emotional conflict arises, the nervous system automatically activates the strategy that once helped them survive. They become quiet, withdraw, and hide what they're feeling. Not because they don't want to connect, but because a deeper part of them has learned that openness carries risk. What looks like emotional distance is often an old survival response repeating itself. In many cases, silence is not a personality trait at all. It is a protective shield built years ago by a child who learned that hiding their feelings felt safer than expressing them. Another common reason people become silent when they're hurt comes from painful relationship experiences. The truth is, many of them were not always quiet. There was a time when they tried to explain how they felt. They opened up, shared their emotions, and made genuine efforts to be understood. But instead of receiving empathy, they were met with criticism, manipulation, or dismissal. Their words were twisted against them. Their feelings were questioned. Every attempt to communicate seemed to create more conflict rather than more understanding. Over time, experiences like gaslighting, constant blame, or emotional invalidation teach the brain a powerful lesson. When every conversation ends with feeling misunderstood, attacked, or made to feel guilty, speaking no longer feels safe. The nervous system begins to associate vulnerability with pain. Eventually, a protective pattern develops. Instead of explaining, they withdraw. Instead of arguing, they stay quiet. Not because they have nothing to say, but because experience has convinced them that saying it will only make things worse. What others often see as avoidance is frequently a learned survival strategy. Deep down, they may still want to be understood, but another part of them remembers what happened the last time they tried. Their silence is not the absence of feelings. It is the result of a brain that has learned, through repeated emotional pain, that sometimes staying quiet feels safer than risking another wound. Not every quiet person is carrying childhood wounds or recovering from a toxic relationship. Sometimes, silence is simply part of how their mind naturally works. In general, people tend to process emotions in two different ways. The first group understands their feelings by talking. They think out loud, and the more they speak, the clearer their emotions become. The second group works in the opposite direction. They need time to process everything internally before they can put it into words. These are often the people who go quiet during conflict or emotional stress. Their silence is not a sign of indifference or avoidance. It's their way of organizing thoughts, emotions, and reactions before responding. What others may see as withdrawal is often a mental process taking place beneath the surface. For them, silence is not a flaw to fix. It's simply the way their brain is wired to make sense of the world. Now that we understand where this silence comes from, let's look at what is actually happening beneath the surface. The first truth is that silence is not empty. When someone goes quiet after being hurt, it may look as if they have stopped caring or mentally checked out of the situation. In reality, the opposite is often true. Their mind is working overtime. They replay conversations, analyze every detail, question their reactions, and search for meaning in what happened. Thoughts race through their head one after another. Was it my fault? Did I misunderstand them? Should I have said something different? While the outside world sees stillness, there is often an intense inner dialogue taking place. They are not avoiding the situation. They are trying to process it. The second truth is that silence is often an act of protection. Many people assume that going quiet is a way of punishing others, but for some individuals, it is actually a way of protecting the relationship. They are aware of the powerful emotions moving through them in that moment. They know they are hurt, angry, disappointed, or overwhelmed. They also know that if they speak too soon, those emotions may come out in ways they later regret. Harsh words spoken in pain can leave scars that last much longer than the original conflict. So instead of reacting impulsively, they hold back. They choose silence because they would rather pause than say something destructive. What looks like withdrawal may actually be an attempt to prevent further damage. The third truth is that pressure makes everything worse. When someone is already overwhelmed, repeatedly demanding answers can push them deeper into shutdown. Questions like, "Why aren't you talking?" or "Just tell me what's wrong," may seem helpful, but to a nervous system already under stress, they often feel like additional pressure. The more they are pushed to respond immediately, the more their mind struggles to find the words. Instead of opening up, they retreat further inward. The freeze response becomes stronger, not weaker. This is why forcing communication rarely creates connection. What they need most is not pressure, but space. Not demands, but safety. Because when a person finally feels safe enough to process their emotions, communication naturally becomes possible again. The danger of misunderstanding this silence is greater than most people realize. When someone is repeatedly pressured, criticized, or judged for needing space, trust begins to erode. Little by little, they stop feeling emotionally safe. Instead of moving closer, they retreat further inward. Conversations become shorter, vulnerability becomes rarer, and the distance between two people quietly grows. No dramatic argument is required. Sometimes relationships weaken through silence alone. The more unsafe a person feels, the less willing they become to open their heart again. If you care about someone who tends to go quiet when they're hurt, the most helpful thing you can offer is not advice, solutions, or demands for answers. What they need most is a sense of emotional safety. Instead of pushing them to talk, try giving them permission to pause. Avoid chasing them with questions or assuming the worst about their silence. A simple response like, "I can see you're overwhelmed. Take the time you need, and I'll be here when you're ready," can be far more powerful than any argument or explanation. When people feel safe from pressure, judgment, and criticism, their nervous system begins to relax. And often, once they no longer feel forced to speak, they become much more willing to open up on their own. And if you're the person who tends to go quiet when you're hurt, it's important to remember that your silence is not a weakness. In many ways, it has been a shield that helped protect you from emotional overwhelm. But even a shield can become a wall if it's left in place for too long. The people who care about you cannot see what is happening inside your mind, and complete silence can sometimes leave them feeling confused, rejected, or disconnected. The goal isn't to force yourself to talk before you're ready. It's simply to leave a small bridge open. A simple message such as, "I need some time to process this," or "I'm overwhelmed right now, but I'll come back and talk when I'm ready," can make a huge difference. It gives you the space you need while reassuring the other person that you're not walking away from the relationship. Sometimes, a few honest words are enough to keep silence from becoming distance. When we look beyond the surface, a different picture begins to emerge. People who go quiet when they're hurt are not necessarily cold, uncaring, or emotionally distant. In many cases, they are the exact opposite. They feel deeply, think deeply, and process experiences at a level that others may never fully see. Their silence is often a reflection of how much something matters to them, not how little. They don't always react immediately, because they take time to understand what they're feeling before expressing it. They are careful with their words because they understand the impact words can have. Far from being emotionally disconnected, they are often trying to protect both their own heart and the hearts of the people around them. What looks like silence from the outside may actually be a form of care, reflection, and emotional depth. If you see yourself in these patterns, there is something important you need to hear. You are not broken. You are not strange. And there is nothing fundamentally wrong with you. The way you respond to emotional pain did not appear out of nowhere. It developed for a reason, whether it came from past experiences, learned survival strategies, or simply the way your mind processes emotions. Your silence has a story behind it. Understanding that story is not about judging yourself. It's about finally meeting yourself with the same compassion you've always needed from others. If this resonated with you, share your story in the comments. You may help someone feel less alone. And if you'd like to explore more insights like this, subscribe and join our growing community.